Please do like, share and subscribe and press the bell icon.
Hello everyone, I hope you all are fine. So today we'll be discussing about our next chapter, that is water. Now first of all, why do we need to study about water? Okay, we all of us know the importance of water in our life. That is, our life is impossible without water. Not only even the plant's life, animal life, all the life forms on earth, these are possible only because of the presence of water. If water is not there, then life is impossible. We can stay without food for a few days, but we cannot stay without water even for a day also. So water is such an important component of our life, and hence we need to study about water in detail. Now let us just first discuss the chemical formula. So chemical formula, that is H2O. Then chemical name, it is dihydrogen oxide. Okay, now let us see the bonding. We can just write down water in this way, we can represent water in this way, or let us see the bonds that has been formed in water. So before discussing with the bond, let us, we know it's made up of hydrogen and oxygen. So atomic number, that is hydrogen has got only one electron. So that is, we can write down the atomic number as 1. Oxygen, atomic number 8. So the electronic configuration, this is only 1. So here in case of oxygen it's 8. So it will be 2, 6. Now we'll see the structure of water. In the center we are having oxygen. So this is oxygen in the center, and 2 hydrogen on the 2 sides. Now oxygen and hydrogen, these are sharing the bonds. Okay, these are sharing the electrons. Now oxygen has got 6 electrons into the outermost shell. So we'll just place 6 electrons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. What about hydrogen? Each hydrogen has got 1 electron, so we'll represent it with cross. See that when two different elements are there, it is always wise to represent the electrons of those elements with a different sign. That is, for oxygen we are representing with a circle, so for hydrogen we are representing with a cross. So this is how we can see the bonding in water molecule. That is, there are covalent bonds, and these are the two lone pair, that lone pair of electrons which are involved in water. That means these 2 electrons are not involved in the formation of a bond, but whereas 1 electron of oxygen along with 1 electron of hydrogen on this side, again 1 electron of oxygen, 1 electron of hydrogen, these are involved in the formation. That is, the electrons are being shared and it leads to the formation of 2 covalent bonds. So these are the covalent bonds which has been formed over here. Covalent bonds between hydrogen and oxygen that has been formed over here. So this is with the regard to the structure of water molecule and the bonding in water molecule. Now around 70% of our Earth's crust that has been our Earth's surface has been occupied by water, but out of that only 2.5% makes up the world's supply of fresh water. That means only this amount of water is useful, remaining all the water that has been filled into the seas, which contains the various types of salts, and this is not good for the drinking purposes. At the same time, we know about water that exists in all the 3 states, that is in the solid, liquid and the gaseous state. Now let us first come to the physical properties of water, the important physical properties of water. So physical properties. So first of all we come to the nature. So it is clear, or we can say pure water is clear, colorless, odorless and transparent liquid. We all of us consume water, and we all of us know that the pure water is clear, colorless, odorless and a transparent liquid. At the same time it is also tasteless. I missed out over here. So clear, colorless, odorless, tasteless and transparent liquid. Next property is boiling point. Okay. Now first of all let us know what do we mean by boiling point. What do we, maybe you have come across the boiling point of various liquids, but what does exactly the boiling point means? Now just imagine, suppose you are having any liquid into a container. Okay, let this, so here this container, it is having a liquid, let it be water. Every liquid, it has got, it will be forming some vapors, and the pressure which has been exerted by the vapors. Suppose if you have some water which has been kept into a saucer and you keep it for 2 days, after some few days, after those 2 days, you will find that the amount of water reduces because it is forming some vapors. So in this way also, suppose if we close this container, these vapors which has been formed, they will be exerting a pressure. Now this vapor, the pressure which has been exerted by these are the vapors, for example, the pressure exerted by the vapors of the liquid, that is called as the vapor pressure. Vapor pressure. Okay. Now if the atmospheric pressure becomes equal to the vapor pressure, or the temperature at which atmospheric pressure becomes equal to the vapor pressure, that temperature is called as the boiling point of that particular liquid. I repeat once again, the temperature at which the atmospheric pressure, the pressure of the atmosphere, becomes equal to the vapor pressure. Now when both of them they become equal, we will find that the liquid starts boiling. And that temperature, when both of them becomes equal and when the liquid starts boiling, that is called as the boiling point of the liquid. So this boiling point is 100 degree Celsius for water. Now as we find that this boiling point, it changes with the pressure, atmospheric pressure. That is, higher the pressure, higher the pressure, higher will be the boiling point. Similarly, lower the atmospheric pressure, lower will be the boiling point. It is due to this reason what happens that when you go to the higher altitudes, that is at in the mountainous regions where the temperature is very low and it's too high, that is where the temperature, that is Mount Everest, or a very high mountainous region where the temperature may be round about, that is 70 degrees Celsius. So that is in the hills, we will find that the pressure is very low. So in the mountainous region where the pressure is very low, so we will find because of the decrease in pressure, the pressure decreases, so we will find that the boiling point of water also decreases. So if the boiling point of water also decreases, that means water starts boiling at a lower temperature. So if water starts boiling at a lower temperature, the usual boiling point is 100 degrees Celsius, that is at the normal atmospheric pressure. But if at the higher altitude the pressure is less, so at higher altitudes the less atmospheric pressure is there, due to which the boiling point also decreases, and as the boiling point decreases, water will boil at a temperature less than 100 degrees Celsius. So if water boils at a temperature less than 100 degrees Celsius, and if you are cooking food, when we cook food, obviously we have water is a medium for cooking food, we will find that the food will not get cooked properly. So what we have to do, either we have to cook food for a longer time, or we have to increase the pressure. Now how can we increase the pressure? That is by use of the pressure cookers. That we use the pressure cookers, and in the pressure cookers we find that the pressure has been increased. So as the pressure increases, we will find that the boiling point also increases, and hence the food gets cooked faster into the hilly regions, because by the use of the pressure cookers. So it's advisable to use pressure cookers into the in the hilly regions. Next we have about the freezing point. So pure water, it freezes at 0 degrees Celsius. So if the water is pure water, it will freeze at 0 degree Celsius under normal pressure. Under normal pressure. Normal pressure, that means 1 atmosphere. Under 1 atmosphere. When the pressure is 1 atmosphere, pure water, it will freeze at 0 degrees Celsius. Now this freezing point, it will decrease with increase in pressure. So we can say freezing point decreases with the increase in pressure. Freezing point decreases with increase in pressure. At the same time, freezing point also decreases by addition of impurity, by adding impurity. If any impurity that has been added to water, will find that the freezing point decreases. But in case of boiling point, what happens? If you are adding an impurity, by addition of an impurity will increase the boiling point. Impurity will increase the boiling point. Clear? I repeat once again the difference between both these terms. That is, in case of boiling point, with the increase in pressure, boiling point increases. With a decrease in pressure, boiling point decreases. And if you add an impurity to water, we will find that the boiling point increases. But in case of freezing point is going to decrease with increase in pressure, and it will increase with decrease in pressure, just the opposite. And at the same time, if you are adding an impurity, then also we find that the freezing point of water is going to decrease. The next property, now in case of all these substances, when we heat them, what happens? They expand, and when we cool, they contract. In case of water also, it shows similar type of behavior but slightly different. That is, when we heat water, it is expanding. When we cool it, it contracts. So when you cool it, it contracts, but this continues only at a certain temperature. That is, this happens only until the water attains a temperature of 4 degrees Celsius. So I repeat once again, that is, on heating, substances expand, and on cooling, the substances, they contract. So water also shows the same type of behavior, but so that is, when you are heating water, it is going to expand. When you cool water, it will contract. Now this, there is slight difference over here. Now this contraction of water, it will take place when you are cooling it, it will go on contracting. contracting. Suppose the water is at a higher temperature and you are cooling it, will go on contracting. But this contraction will continue only up till 4 degrees Celsius. When you are further cooling it, what will happen? Instead of contracting above 4 degrees, that is above 4 degrees Celsius, water will start expanding. Water expands, not above, below 4 degrees Celsius. So when you are cooling it will contract, but this contraction it will continue only until it reaches 4 degrees Celsius. When you are further cooling it, that is below 4 degrees Celsius, water will start expanding. And this expansion it will continue until it reaches 0 degrees Celsius to form ice. It will go on expanding. As it is going on expanding, what is happening to the density? Density decreases. Density decreases. So from here density starts decreasing and ice will be having less density, the lesser density, and at 4 degrees Celsius we'll find water will be having the maximum density. At 4 degrees Celsius water possesses the maximum density, because after that when you are further cooling it below this temperature, we'll find that water will start expanding until it comes to 0 degrees Celsius and forms ice, and the expansion will go on until it reaches to this temperature and formation of ice takes place. And from here density also starts decreasing. So as the density starts decreasing, ice has got the if you compare both water and ice, obviously ice has got less density. So if ice has got less density, we'll find that when we put ice into a glass of water, ice always floats on water. You can just check it out now. You take one glass of water and you put ice into it. You'll find that ice will be floating on the surface. Why? Because density of ice is less as compared to the density of water, and we know anything which has got a lesser density is going to float, and anything which has got more density is going to sink down. So ice having the lesser density as compared to the density of water, it will float on the surface and water will remain down. Now this phenomenon where water starts expanding below 4 degrees Celsius, this we call as anomalous expansion of water. Anomalous expansion of water. Now this is a very important phenomenon shown by water. See that you go through it carefully. This is an important part from the physical properties, so you learn it carefully, because from all these properties, this is one of the very important property, that is water. That is, this expansion of water is called as the anomalous expansion of water. And this anomalous expansion of water is very much helpful to the marine life. How it is helpful to the marine life? You just imagine, suppose if this is your sea or a water body. Now as the temperature cools down, as the temperature goes below 4 degrees Celsius, we will find it is forming ice. That is at 0 degree it forms the ice. So the ice will be at the top, ice pieces will be at the top, and below it there will be water. That means this water, ice remaining on the top, the below layer which is there, that is in the liquid state, where the marine life or the fishes, aquatic life, they can survive over here. At the same time, when ice is at the top, we know ice is a bad conductor, of heat. So it is not going to allow any heat to be coming into this water, and therefore the marine life, the fishes and all, they can survive over here into the water. Otherwise, you see, if the weather is very hot, it becomes difficult for the aquatic life to survive. At the same time, if the ice is not floating at the top, then where the marine life is going to survive? There is no place for the fishes and all to survive. So because ice being lighter, it floats on the top. Ice density is less, it floats on the top, and the aquatic life, the marine life, they can survive into this liquid medium. So this is what is enormous expansion of water. I am not writing down the definition, whole definition on the board, because it's going to take a long time. See that you can read it from your text, because I will also be sending you the notes. You just read from the notes. Then next we come to the next physical property is about density. So I already told you the density is maximum at 4 degrees Celsius. So maximum at 4 degrees Celsius. Maximum density at 4 degrees Celsius, and it will be having, that is 1 gram per cubic centimeter or 1000 kg per meter cube. This is the density of water. That is the maximum density at 4 degrees Celsius. The next point that we have is the latent heat of fusion of ice. Latent heat of fusion of ice. Now just imagine, that is, if you are having ice and you want to change it into water, you have to supply some heat. So the amount of heat required to change 1 gram of ice into 1 gram of water, this amount of heat is called as that is the amount of heat required. It will be absorbing that heat. This amount of heat required, this is called as the latent heat of fusion of ice. So we can see amount of heat required to change from solid to liquid state at its melting point. At its melting point. Why? Because ice has to melt to form into water. So amount of heat required, amount of heat required to change from solid to liquid at its melting point without change in temperature. This amount of heat required, we call that as a latent heat of fusion of ice. How much is that heat? That is 336 joules per gram, or it is also 80 calories per gram, or 80 calories per gram. So that means this much amount of heat ice has to absorb to change, that is 1 gram of ice to change into 1 gram of water at its melting point. This much amount of heat required at its melting point. This heat we call it as a latent heat of fusion of ice, or latent heat of fusion of substance which is in the solid state. Now at this point, when the ice changes into water, we see that there is a change of state which has been taking place over here. So when something is changing its state, during this change of state you will find there won't be any rise in temperature. Suppose if you are having an ice and you are changing into water, you put a thermometer over there. When the change of state will take place, you will find the thermometer is not going to show any change in the temperature, because that heat that has been absorbed, that has been utilized in bringing about the change of the state. So because the heat has been utilized, the thermometer will not show any rise in the temperature. So we can say the amount of heat required to change from solid to liquid at its melting point without change in temperature, that is called as the latent heat of fusion of ice. And this amount of heat required is 336 joules per gram. It is also 80 calories per gram. Now at the same time, suppose if you are changing 1 gram of water back into 1 gram of ice, that is 1 gram of water solidifies to form 1 gram of ice at 0 degrees Celsius, because from water we are changing to ice at 0 degrees Celsius. This amount of heat that is released, heat will be released. Heat will be released. And this amount of heat released, this is called as the latent heat of solidification. So this heat, we call this as latent heat of solidification. Once again, let me explain you, that is, you are changing ice to water, so that means fusion of ice is taking place. So this amount of heat required to change 1 gram of ice to 1 gram of water at its melting point without changing temperature, that is called as latent heat of fusion of ice, which is equals to 336 joules per gram or 80 calories per gram. Now this water also, if you want to freeze back into ice, will find that heat will be released. We have to cool it, so heat has to be released. How much heat has to be released? That is same amount of heat, that is 336 joules per gram or 80 calories per gram. This much amount of heat that has to be released from water, only then it is going to change into ice. And when this heat has been released, we'll find the heat is released, so it should show it, the temperature should be less into the thermometer, it should show a dip into the thermometer, but it is not going to show that because the amount of heat released that has been utilized in the bringing about the change of state. So this amount of heat we call it as a latent heat of solidification. Next we have the next term, that is, let me rub it off. Latent heat of vaporization. Latent heat of vaporization of water. So energy required or amount of heat required to change water into vapor at its boiling point. I repeat once again, amount of heat required to change water into vapor. Water has to be changed into vapor. So water is changing into vapor. So obviously the boiling point of water is involved. So amount of heat required to change water into vapor at its boiling point without any change in temperature. This amount of heat required is called as the latent heat of vaporization of water. Suppose if you are having water and you are changing it into water or into vapor or into steam, so some amount of heat is required. So this amount of heat required, that is 2268 joules per gram. This amount of heat is required to change water into vapor. Now when this change has been taking place, there is a change in the state which has been taking place. That is, liquid state is changing into the gaseous state. So you'll find again there will not be any change into there won't be any rise into the thermometer because the heat supplied has been utilized in bringing about the change of the state. So this amount of heat that has been required over here, or the heat absorbed in bringing about the change of state, that is 2268 joules per gram, and this is called as the latent heat of vaporization of water. That means this is a fixed quantity, that is the latent heat of vaporization of water is 2268 joules per gram. That is 1 gram of water changes into 1 gram of steam or into vapor. Again, if you are changing vapor back into water, what will happen? Heat will be released. So we can show here heat released to change water into vapor, that is 1 gram of vapor back into 1 gram of water. So that is vapor changes into water at its boiling point. So this amount of heat required over here, this is called as the latent heat of condensation. Latent heat of condensation. Because vapor is changing into water, so the process of condensation is taking place over here. So this we call it as a latent heat of condensation. Is it clear? So we can say, I repeat once again, vapor changing into water, heat is released, and how much heat is released? That is 2268 joules per gram of heat is released. That is 1 gram of steam or 1 gram of vapor changes into 1 gram of water at 100 degrees Celsius. At 100 degrees Celsius. This is called as the latent heat of condensation. Clear, everyone? That is latent heat of vaporization of water as well as latent heat of condensation. So this side, we are moving on this side, there is a latent heat of vaporization. When you are turning back on this side, this is a latent heat of condensation of water. That is same amount of heat will be released, and here this much amount of heat will be absorbed in changing from water to vapor. Next property we have So 8 point specific heat capacity. So 1 gram of, now first of all let us understand what do we mean by this specific heat capacity. Now 1 gram of water if you take, and if you want to 1 gram of water, if you want to heat it, how much you want to heat it? To 1 degree Celsius. 1 gram of water, it has to be heated to 1 degree Celsius. So obviously it will absorb some energy, some heat energy will be absorbed. Now this heat energy which is absorbed, this is equal to how much? That is 4.2 joules. This amount of heat energy that has been absorbed, that is to change from 1 gram of water to 1 gram of water has to change to 1 gram of water, it has to be heated to 1 degree Celsius. That is, the temperature is rising. So when the temperature rises, obviously it is absorbing heat. So to increase the temperature 1 gram of water to 1 degree Celsius, it is absorbing 4.2 joules of energy. Now again, suppose if you are increasing again for the 1 degree Celsius, what will happen? Again it is going to absorb this much amount of heat energy. Again then you increase the temperature by 1 degree Celsius. So every time when the temperature is rising by 1 degree Celsius, it is absorbing this much amount of heat energy, that is 4.2 joules of energy. Suppose if this 1 degree Celsius, that is from 0 degree, it is changing to 4 degree Celsius. So 4.2 into 4 will be getting the value, that is will be the amount of heat that has been absorbed. So this quantity of heat required, or the now this 4.2 joules, it is also equal to 1 calorie. It is equivalent to 1 calorie. 1 calorie of heat energy. 1 calorie of heat. So 4.2 joules or 1 calorie, both are same. Both are same. So we can say in change of 1 gram of water, when 1 gram of water whose temperature has to rise by 1 degree Celsius, we have to provide 1 calorie of heat or 4.2 joules of the heat. Now this amount of heat required to change 1 gram of water to this amount of heat required to heat the water, 1 gram of water to 1 degree Celsius, this is called as the specific heat capacity. So that means what? Such a large, that is 1 calorie of heat or 4.2 joules of heat energy that has been required. Now this fixed amount of heat absorbed is the specific heat. This, and obviously it's a fixed quantity of heat that has been absorbed. This is called as a specific heat capacity. And because it is such a high value, we find that water, obviously when it has been put into any on any hot surface, obviously how much energy that it will absorb? Obviously this one, that is 4.2 joules or 1 calorie of the heat that has been going to absorb. See, when you want to raise the temperature of water by 1 degree Celsius, you are supplying heat and water will absorb the heat. But on the contrary, when you want to cool a particular article or a particular object like the car radiators or any surface which has been hot, then you put water on it. So what will it is going to absorb this much amount of the heat energy. So it is for this reason we find that it has been used in motor car radiators or any utensil which has been hot or any hot surface. We put water, will find that they will absorb such a large amount of heat and hence the surface cools down. The substances, they cools down. The next point is water acts as a universal solvent. Water, we call it as a universal solvent. Why do we call water as a universal solvent? Because it has got the capacity to dissolve almost everything. Solids, liquids and gases, all of them, they get dissolved in water very easily. Now why is that these substances, they dissolve very easily? Because water has got the tendency to break up the bonds, to loosen the bonds. Now any substance, there have as I already said, that a chemical compound has been formed by the there's a bond which has been there, chemical bond that has been existing between a chemical compound or the different types of substances. So water has the capacity to weaken those bonds, to break those bonds. Now this capacity to just weaken or make the different elements in a compound to move away from each other. This we call it as a dielectric constant. So just water has got a very high value of dielectric constant, now 80.1, and we take approximately, that is 80, it's 80.1, but for sake of simplicity we take it as 80. So the value of dielectric constant does not have any units, that is 80. 80 is the dielectric constant value for water, which is at around 20 degrees Celsius. Now look here, suppose if we are having sodium chloride, it will ionize in water, that is Na plus Cl minus. Let's take water. It is also going to ionize, that is H plus OH minus. Now there are two oppositely charged ions over here, there are two oppositely charged ions in case of water also. Over here in case of sodium also, it ionizes to form two oppositely charged ions. What will happen? H plus is going to attract this Cl minus, positive, and this is negative. And OH minus is going to attract this Na plus. And because of this, that is pulling of the oppositely charged ions by the opposite charges, or they are able to separate these ions. And this property of separation of the oppositely charged ions, we call that as a dielectric constant value. So it has got a very high dielectric constant value. It is all inorganic salts, all substances, they can dissolve very well in water, and because all the substances are capable of dissolving in water, we call this that is water is a universal solvent. It is a very good solvent, it can dissolve almost everything. And because sometimes it so happens that we feel that certain substances are insoluble, but even if the substances most of the substances are soluble into water. Now let us see an activity regarding this. That is, most of the substances are soluble in water, but there are certain salts, certain inorganic salts which may seem to be soluble. We feel that they have been mixed properly, but then they are soluble very much. But then if you perform an experiment, you will realize that certain substances, they remain insoluble to a very little extent. So we'll take a beaker containing water, and we put a watch glass over it. Into the watch glass also we'll take pure water or distilled water, the ordinary water that you have, and we heat it. We are heating it. Now this water that we have taken into this beaker, this is acting as a water bath. See, if we heat this water in a watch glass directly, it becomes very difficult because it may break, or it is not very handy. So in order to make things working out, what we do, we take a beaker. So this beaker is acting as a water bath. When we are heating something with the help of sand, that is called as the sand bath. So when we perform experiments in the laboratory, many times we have to use water bath or the sand bath. So we are using a water bath over here. So when all this water is being heated, when all of this water, it forms the vapors, this water gets evaporated, you take this watch glass, you will find that there will be some concentric rings into the watch glass. Some concentric rings will be formed into the watch glass. Now what are those concentric rings? Those are obviously the dissolved salts. So substances like certain salts, we feel that they are dissolved. They are very much soluble in water. Obviously everything is very much soluble in water, but some amount of it remains undissolved. So when we are heating it, those dissolved salts, they will arrange itself in some fashion or in some way, not always in the form of, like here in the book it has been given that is there in the concentric ring, but in some pattern you will find some pattern will be formed on the watch glass. So those are because of the dissolved salts which remain, some of the salts which are present in water. So those salts, although they seem apparently to be dissolved in water, but they are not. Some of them, they remain undissolved. So this, we cannot call this as dissolved salts. So these are the salts which seem to be dissolved, but they are not actually dissolved. If you look at it, you will find that they seem to be dissolved, but some amount of it always remains undissolved, which we cannot see it with our eyes. So that is why we have performed this experiment, and then after, when we see this, we realize that some of the salts were undissolved. That is why they are forming some concentric rings. Not only in a watch glass or a beaker, you just take a container, you take one small container or a saucer at home, and you just take some amount of water and you heat it, and when that whole of the water has got evaporated, you will find some pattern will be formed. Need not be necessarily concentric rings will be formed, but some pattern will be there on the watch glass, or otherwise also in certain places like on the table or somewhere, when water spills, some amount of water spills, and when it dries up, you will find that mark of water will be there, because some salts, certain minerals which seem to be dissolved, apparently will remain undissolved in certain quantities. So this is how it shows the formation of concentric rings. Then next is, so with this we finish with the physical properties. Let us study the importance of water, how it is important to us. So the 10th point, importance of water. How it is important. We all, the human beings, we need water for our life. Then at the same time, marine life also. Marine life, it is not only marine life, human life, marine life, all of them, they require water. At the same time, marine life also takes up the oxygen which has been dissolved in water. And they utilize it for the process of respiration. Then aquatic plants, in the water bodies are aquatic plants. What will they take up? They take up the carbon dioxide which has been dissolved in water, and what will they do? They will carry out the process of photosynthesis. So this is only because of the presence of water. At the same time, carbon dioxide present in water, that will react with limestone which is present in water. In water, like when you go deep into the oceans, you will find there is also some amount of calcium carbonate present. So calcium carbonate will react with carbon dioxide plus water, forming calcium bicarbonate. Now this calcium bicarbonate, it is of use to the marine life, that is your certain organisms such as snails and all, they have got their shells made up of calcium carbonate. So how do they make the shells of calcium carbonate? That is, from this calcium bicarbonate, they will extract from this calcium bicarbonate snails, oysters, they will extract this calcium carbonate, and the shells on their body will be made because of this calcium bicarbonate. So this is how water is important to us, that is, we human beings, it is important. At the same time, marine life also will take up the oxygen dissolved in water and will undergo the process of respiration. Then aquatic plants, they will take up carbon dioxide for the process of synthesis. At the same time, there are various types of marine organisms which has got shells on the body. So those shells will be made from this calcium bicarbonate. That is, from the calcium bicarbonate, they will extract some calcium carbonate. Now how this calcium bicarbonate has been formed, that is by the reaction. There is some limestone in water, deep inside the oceans there is some calcium carbonate. So calcium carbonate plus carbon dioxide plus water is forming calcium bicarbonate. So this is how water is useful to all of us, and we had finished with the physical properties and importance of water. We will continue further. Thank you.